So I'm a religious person. I go to church on Sundays. At church, I do things like sing hymns and participate in religious rituals, pray. This is something I share with many people throughout human history. And in fact, I think it's the singing of religious hymns and prayers and the participating in religious ritual that in fact connects us to a lot of the earliest peoples that we learn about from very ancient literature. Now, of course, cultures change. The god to whom I sing is not the same as the god to whom the ancient Egyptians sing. But there's a little bit of I think, frustration I have when we think about literature and religion that I want to clear up before we talk about ancient hymns, which I'm going to dedicate a few episodes to. And this is that somehow that serious literature is inherently secular or in competition with, maybe even written to critique established religion or traditional religious practices. Now, it's certainly true that some of the greatest literature that has come out of human cultures has been critical of or standing in opposition to particular religious beliefs or practices. If we think of the dialogues of Plato, there's a lot of critique in those dialogues of ancient Roman religion. If we look at, say, the writings of Augustine, of Hippo, or the writings of Nietzsche, there is explicit rejection of religious practices and beliefs of the people in the cultures that surround these writers. But if we're not careful, I think we can end up thinking that serious art is always non-religious or critical of religion. In fact, much of the great religious literature and the great art of the world just in general, even aside from literature, is particularly interested in the celebration of religious practice, in the exploration of religious doctrine, theology, religious ideals, religious ethics. And so I want to make sure that we are very clear on the fact that when we talk about the history of poetry, we have to take religion seriously in its many forms. Now, a lot of the religions that we learn about in the ancient world were in direct competition with each other. And we even have religious texts, literary texts that talk about one god defeating another god, or one faith system overcoming or transforming another system. So there is contradiction, there is crisis, there is critique in religious literature. But we need to understand that literature at its most robust and beautiful can be deeply, deeply religious. So we shouldn't approach ancient literature, or modern literature for that example, with this attitude that, oh, if someone's writing about their religious beliefs, we don't need to take it seriously as art. Dante's Divine Comedy, Augustine's Confessions, the hymns of the ancient Egyptians, the hymns of the Hebrews, the hymns of the Greeks, many of these are deeply, deeply religiously devout. And the religious beliefs and structure of beliefs often become the structure and patterning of the art itself. So as we approach ancient literature, as we think about literature throughout history, don't fall into this trap that religion equals not artistic or not authentic, and that authenticity in art or true art always has to critique. Now, I mentioned Dante's Divine Comedy earlier. Dante's Divine Comedy is such a masterpiece that you have both very strict and even vehement protest against things that Dante thinks are wrong with the medieval Roman Catholic Church, while also having great devotion and even, high mystical ecstasy in devotion to the God and saints that the Roman Catholics worshipped in the medieval world. So often you have both. We need to make sure that we don't assume that our views, that our culture's views, that our subculture's views, right? We live in a world of the internet where there are subcultures and subforums for everything. don't think that what you think and what the people around you who agree with you think is what everyone else has thought throughout history, and that's the way to evaluate art. We need to take art and literature on its own terms. And it turns out, delightfully and mysteriously, that often the terms of art are explicitly religious. Next time we're going to look at ancient Egyptian and ancient Sumerian hymns to some gods and goddesses maybe you've never heard of before, and from some writers, both men and women, who I hope you'll start to get to know. Thanks so much.